Mission: to create and deliver wellness training and comprehensive sex ed to schools, to provide digital tools and resources to survivors of sexual trauma and wellness training to all participants, and to offer live events and creative programs that will heal and empower through the magic of Psalm, or voice, sound, song, and hymn. Psalm is a noun, a sacred song, sound, hymn, or a poem.
I'm a serial inventor. I've been an executive that's run a multi-billion-dollar business in 44 countries. I have 75 patents to my name. I'm okay at that stuff. But that's not what we're going to talk about. What we're going to talk about is, I think, more related to what the Magic of Psalm nonprofit is focused on. And I'm going to try to cover a lot in a super short amount of time, and it's probably going to be super boring, so we'll get to the end, and then you guys will ask questions, and then it'll be great. Because you guys will make it great. Okay. And this is... All right, better. So, we got a lot of things that aren't going right. We got lots of sexual violence, we have human trafficking, and when I look at the roots of these things, like, I think a lot of this stems from the historical brokenness of the definitions of gender that we've created and kind of the tension that exists in those definitions. And whether I liked it or not, because I experiment with lots of things because I like to build things, but you know, for better or worse, my life also ended up being an experiment in having to untangle that brokenness. Because if you are not easily falling into male gender, female gender, then you get really bad messages from the world, actually. The main message is that you should kill yourself or we'll murder you. And that sounds like really harsh, but that's actually kind of the message. If you want to see what that's actually about, there's the only holiday for trans people for a long time was called the Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is in late November. And we created a site that's called tdor.info. It basically just documents how trans people die. And we mostly get murdered, and we get murdered in really gruesome ways. It's not like somebody just shoots us in the head. We get shot like 47 times and cut into pieces. It's like there's something about being in between that creates this very, very harsh response, this desire for violence. And if I needed to go explain it, I mean, I alluded to it before, but I didn't spend that much time talking about how invested people are in it. But for a long time, it really, really mattered to be able to go tell whether somebody was a man or a woman, to be able to figure out which gender, which gender they role that they have in society, because women had the role of being property. Once they were married, they were the property of their husbands. If you rape your property, then that's my property. I do what I want. It's a free country. And this is not that long ago. And this is actually happening all throughout the world, too. There's honor killings. There's many things where because of the definitions and the ways that we live gender, we enable violence, and we enable it at the societal level. This is not just one bad egg, little screwy in the head, and they do something really violent. No, this is just the overall water that we're swimming in comes with those rules. So this talk is really about, like, how the hell do you get out of all of that? Because we dug a hole for a couple thousand years like that. So this is my first attempt at trying to explain some ways to get out of it. Okay, there's 3 steps that that constitute why it's so broken, and then I'm going to talk about 3 ways to undo all of that. So the first thing is basically the confusion that biological sex basically defines gender. And we talked about this before. It's definitely not true. Depending on where you live in the world, then men can wear skirts in Scotland and Myanmar, and that's culturally normal. In some cultures, there's matriarchies where women are in charge. They're the ones with the power and the wisdom. They're the people that are looked up to make really important decisions for the tribe or for their people. So clearly, if it was just based on XX or XY defines everything you're going to do in life, then there wouldn't be all these variations across societies and cultures as to the way that you express your life. It's actually a thing called gender that we basically create as a frame on top of that. And then we create this very strong connection between sex and gender, even though both gender is, a lot of it is socially constructed, and it doesn't have to be directly tied to biological sex. And we also know this because there's many cultures. In Thailand, like the transgender folks are very visible, they're well accepted. In the Pacific Island cultures, there was a third generation that was recognized and respected all throughout history. In the Native American cultures, most tribes had a third gender, at least. In Indonesia, they have like 5 or 6. These things are also, like you can define more than one role, that's the point. You don't need to just define the one role or the second role. So anyway, once you know that like gender is a thing that is kind of socially constructed and it's different than biological sex, then you need to ask yourself, why, how are we constructing it? Why are we constructing it that way? So the way that we have constructed it, we basically said, okay, here's the performance of male gender, and men should do it, and here's the performance of female gender, and women should do it. And the better that you are at the rules that we lay out, then the better man or the better woman that you are. And that it translates into evolutionary biology terms of, oh, you are a more, you have better mating fitness, which a better way to say that is like, you're sexy to the culture, right? And, okay, so many problems with all the sentences that I just said, even though that's the basic underlying assumptions of society, right? Because number one, who decided to make those rules that would make you a better woman or make you a better man, right? If the definition of a better woman is to be more docile or to be serving everybody at the expense of your own needs and the expense of your own ambition in life, that's not a very good game to go win at to be a good woman. And if the definition of being a man is to like dominate and have control and not be questioned and like beat other men, that is not a very good game to win in order for us to go say, hey, this is what it takes to be a great man, right? So I think that's already broken. But then the second thing that's broken is, why does winning that at that particular ladder, which we didn't even make up, if we had made up the ladder for the things that we thought were important, at least that would be an improvement. But we didn't make up this ladder, and why does being great at that ladder need to be responsible for people saying, oh, I find you sexy now, right? Like in practice, all throughout civilization, the definition of sexiness has changed too. Like a couple hundred years ago, women that were heavier were actually way more sexually attractive, because if you're super thin, maybe you have jaundice or whatever. All kinds of things might be wrong if you're thin. So like, yes, let's have like a fertile, larger woman. That's beautiful, that's sexy, right? And you can go around to all, oh look, I grew up as a geek. Trust me, when I was growing up, geeks were not sexy at all. And now it's like sexy because, well, we have $1 billion too. But, like that shows you how fungible that is, right? That's a thing that changes really, really fast. And like a type of power that everybody has is you can up your standards in terms of what you decide to find attractive. You don't need to be like, oh, well, they're like a manly man by society's standards. You should ask yourself, do you actually agree with those standards? That's such a womanly woman by society's standards. You should ask yourself, do I agree with those standards? Maybe you don't. And actually, like the authentic expression of your actual standards is already part of the thing that's going to start breaking the mold. All right. Okay, there's some clapping. Okay, that wasn't even the clappy point. Okay, so here's what happened basically. We have like a bucket for masculine gender, we have a bucket for feminine gender, and like I said, in other civilizations, sometimes they have a third bucket. In Indonesia, they have 5 buckets. It is what it is. So, but in a lot of the places that we're talking about where there's all this violence, there are 2 buckets. And we do a number of things which I think is a total, creates a lot of trauma actually, which is we pretend that masculinity and femininity are opposites of each other. They're not opposites of each other, right? To me, like at most, it's like the difference between like red and purple. Like they're colors, and there's a lot of, because we're human beings, there's a huge amount of similarity. Now what we did is, well, we said we're opposites of each other, and it's almost like if there's one bucket here and one bucket here, then over here we get to put some adjectives. We get to put, strong, courageous, a great leader, and in this bucket we get to put like, elegant and thoughtful and sweet, and it's like, what we're really saying though is that there's actually a huge bucket of attributes of how you could be a human being. And we decided before you were born that like no matter who you are and how you are, you only get to use half of the adjectives. I mean, there are some buckets, and one is in the middle, like honesty is good, right? That's fine. So we have a little bit in the middle, but we have some highly genderized attributes that don't need to be genderized, because when you do it like that, what happens to like the strong and ambitious women? What happens to the elegant men, the kind men? Right? Like they don't have a spot to be because we already decided that like, oh, this bucket, that bucket. So when I think about the fight for transgender rights, it's, yeah, stop murdering us, so that's good. But like, it's not really about like stop murdering 0.3% of the world, the population. Like I think of it as like a fight for everybody to be able to have access to all the stuff. Because in the name of these buckets, like men really hurt men, and women really hurt women, and men hurt women, and women hurt men, because they're trying to police each other into these buckets again. And what's wrong, if I really am ambitious? What's wrong if I really do, feel things deeply, and it makes me cry sometimes? Like, what's wrong? Like, what's really happening is I'm just a human being, and like this fake expression that they're opposites makes it so that in our mind we can't logically put it together. It's like, but how could you be if they're opposites? Because opposites can't, no. But, you were wrong in the first place. They weren't opposites, duh. Okay. So, no. Okay, so how are you going to go fix it all? So, number one, you got to go and just give it all back. Let it so that every human being gets to look at all the adjectives and be like, I really feel like this, and like, I want to go explore that. And I know not many women do so-and-so, but I want to try that out. I know not many men, are out here doing this, but I want to go try that out. And we need to go encourage that and see that as a beautiful thing. And as the part of, it's going to be a long process. It's going to be a long process of reintegration, where we do the opposite of the toxic harm that we've done to each other, where we've constantly pulled people back. Oh no, a classy woman doesn't do that, right? A real man doesn't do that. And like all of us have done that in our lives, either to people that like we were romantically interested in, people that we, were responsible for raising, people that like are just our friends. And it's like, we don't need to do that. Like if somebody is authentically exploring something, then be like, that's amazing. What does it feel like? Right? What is it like for you? And like, how can I help you? That's simple stuff. Second thing is, don't make it so that the absolute achievement of, the feminine gender ideal or the masculine gender ideal is the thing that defines what you're attracted to. Just be attracted to human beings based on how you actually connect with them. Because the thing is there's some people that like go all the way to the top of the ladder. They're the manliest men and the the womanliest women, and they're like shit at relationships, honestly. So it's like, wouldn't you rather have a relationship with somebody who's good at relationships? Like make that decision and be like, this is a shit relationship even though you're beautiful. This is a shit relationship even though you meet all the criteria that everybody told me to look for, and it reflects good on me at a party. Like, no, you're bigger than that. So fuck all that. Like, be bigger than that. And then the last thing goes all the way back to the beginning around gender and sex and, biological sex. And, I think what has happened is that, biologically, men and women are not exactly the same, so fair enough. But we've basically used that to justify two schools of thought. One is that they are totally different, and therefore this one can be oppressed, or we can have totally different laws, or we can hurt them like this, And the other is that we're completely the same, which is like, oh, there are no differences, and oh, yes, you just had a baby, but why couldn't you be back in work in like so many days? And it's like, no. Like, What is actually true is that we are very much the same and we're a little bit different. And here's a simple way to go think about this. It's like, you can get a liver transplant or a kidney transplant or a heart transplant and a lot of different things. If you were to transplant it between a man and a woman, it works fucking fine because it's actually the same stuff. Those things work the same. Like, if you needed a heart transplant, you should not reject it because of biological sex. It makes no sense unless you want to die. So like the majority of the human body is actually pretty the same. There's maybe 10% of it, obviously primary sex characteristics and some secondary sex characteristics, but it's like less than 10% of the mass of your body, which is actually different. And off of that 10%, we decided to like make totally draconian ways of hurting each other for thousands of years. And like the thing is that I have a phrase that duality typically doesn't really exist in the universe. Duality is just a perspective on difference. When we say that like masculine and feminine is a duality, or that they're fighting each other, or that they're black and white and they can't blend, then that is a perspective that we're choosing in order to advance an agenda of separation. And you don't need to do that. Like in the presence of difference, you don't need to see it through a lens of duality. You can also see difference and approach it with the lens of celebration. You can also see difference and approach it with curiosity, respect, love. And that 10% difference biologically between men and women, how do we go and love that? Like, what do men specifically need because of that 10% difference that we can do a better job at? What do women specifically need because of that 10% difference that we can do a better job at? And that's what it means to become better as a civilization. Not like, and I don't want to be hard on anybody who's like talking about the blending of the masculine and feminine. I think that that's like a good like pit stop on the way to understanding that they're not dualities, right? That like all of this is human beings. We have some differences that we should seek to respect. If you want to go see a good example where we did this right once, was look at the American for Disabilities Act. We basically said, oh, you know what? These people are human beings, and they're a little bit different than us, than people that are walking on two legs, but they should be able to go to the bathroom. They should be able to go to a store and like have a place to park where they don't need to go and wheel their chair like half a mile in order to get to the store. And that's basically seeing some difference and saying, how do we go honor that difference? Because all of us are human beings that are worthwhile to exist in this world. And that's kind of the lens. It doesn't need to be the war of the sexes. This is completely generated to propagate a particular way of being with each other that hasn't really been good to us. We gave it a long enough run that I think we have a pretty good sense that that's not the way to do it. So I think that's it for now. Any questions, and then I'm good. Thank you. There's one question.
In our society right now, what do you think is the most harmful place of communicating the difference of masculine and femininity? What outlet do you see? Is it media? Is it our governmental system? What do you see as something that is so detrimental to blending that non-dualist idealism? Or ideology, I should say.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I guess the problem is that it's almost everything. And I think because it's almost everything, then folks feel a little bit hopeless about it. But I didn't talk that much about my experience as a trans person, but really the message that you get over and over is that you shouldn't exist, you don't fit. And suicide rates and suicide attempts for trans people is astronomical. Because we basically get the message that we're not supposed to be here and we don't fit. I think part of what I'm trying to do is just exist so that people can be like, oh, you know what? This gender stuff is not as fixed as it is, as we have been told, as we've been telling ourselves. What have I missed in my life because I told myself that story so many times? And is it possible for a trans person to be something other than a prostitute on TV that also gets murdered a lot of times? I follow this maybe more closely than you, but I was like, oh, we're represented. Oh, you got murdered. Shoot. Why did that happen? Anyway, so it's like, I think to the extent that, I'm going to totally do this. As Rachel was mentioning, like to the extent that you can go see different people like living it in a different way, to the extent that you have experiences in your life that are traumatic because of the way that it's been, and you want to go like reevaluate it and give it another shot in a different way, I think those are the cracks that begin to go change it. I think the people that are winning at the existing gender game by stressing about their weight or trying to do P90X even though they hurt their joints all the time or what have you, the people that are winning aren't going to question it, until something more significant breaks, or until they realize that, oh, I just had a bunch of shit relationships with beautiful, societally beautiful people, because that doesn't create a great relationship. Right? I think people need to experience the breaking directly, but as more people start to question it because of that breaking and living in a different way, then that's the way that it'll change. I was going to say super quickly, because she didn't say it, where did she go? That Rachel is running for Congress in California. So if you can vote in California, that's the place to go. Why didn't she say that? Okay. Northern California? Okay. Orange County. Orange County. So if you're in Orange County, yes, that's what you do. Sorry, another question now. Thank you.
On a day-to-day basis, for someone like myself, what can we do to support you other than obviously sharing inclusion and the mentality, but what are some of the challenges, I guess, that you face on a day-to-day basis that everybody here that's supportive can make a difference in your life?
If you ever see somebody like being bullied, then like stepping up actually makes a huge difference. Like, yeah, this is still true, but the percentages are a little bit better than when I was young. But when I was younger, I would go out and I would be like harassed or like within threat of violence probably 50-60% of the time. So it's not the sort of thing where you're like, yes, I can't wait to go out. You're like, ooh, I kind of like want, but because I don't want to be home for my whole life. But like, yeah, that last time that creepy thing happened on the bus, and the last time like this person like verbally threatened me and followed me for a block, and I was like, yeah, if you see stuff like that, because it happens all the fucking time, you can be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, what did that person do to you? Like, why are you so mad? Now, of course, I can say, why are you so mad? I know why they're so mad. The reason that they're so mad is what they're seeing is a person that decided not to go play the masculine gender performance game in the way that they did. And they have so much like built up into their winning of that game that like a real man punishes other men that aren't men. Like that's what's happening with them. I know what's up with them, and it's fine. It doesn't necessarily prevent like a fist, because you still get that. But it's like, at least I've spent the time to understand them, for sure. But like, I wrote an article once, and it said something like, and all this like struggle like makes me try to spend more time understanding everybody. But I don't think that like the kindness and like the desire to understand and the compassion that trans people need to do, almost as a matter of survival, like really like counts for anything. I don't think anybody sees that and says, oh my gosh, like you are understanding why I'm so rageful about being a man. You're understanding like all the anxiety about being a woman and why it's so tough to be asked to do so many things with a smile and perfectly, and like it's easy, right? And it's like, understand it, and like recognize that like, maybe open up and like hear some of that, because that's the gift that we have. It's not that we like have a magical ability to go to the bathroom. That's not, that's important that we can do things safely. But it's like the accidental gift that we've been given is to have to go deep into the gendered pain that everybody lives. And then we maybe have something to do.
You know, I think that I love who you are, really. It's so amazing. And I think, you know, I think the message for anybody who's going through such this kind of suffering, because, you know, as a woman, you know, you're told to be graceful. You're supposed to be this way or that way. And it's such a control issue for so many people, to, maybe for men, that they believe that they need to be controlling other women or whatever it is. I'm not exactly sure. But you know, the Dalai Lama, he said, you know, with love, acceptance, and compassion, you know, if we were taught that from the very beginning, you know, if we could, just those simple concepts, you know what I'm saying? I think the world would be such a different place, and if that could be representative of what you go through, we as women, or whatever, you know, I mean, we're not victims, obviously. We don't, I mean, you know, to live as a victor rather than a victim is such an amazing, powerful place, and to live with love, acceptance, and compassion is a beautiful way to live, too. So I'm not really asking a question, but I just think maybe that would be helpful in this situation.
Yeah. Like one quick reflection on masculinity is that, like, men are denied almost all of their emotions. The only acceptable ones are lust and rage, and in particular contexts. And, you know, lust and rage, like, look at the violent movies that we have, right? It's like, I shoot enough people and then I fuck you. That's basically the plot of the story for all men in these movies. And it's like, okay. And like, really, they're deprived of all the emotions. Like, when was the last time where it's like, you saw just like a really joyful man who just like loves to dance, and like people are like, oh, this is a perfect picture of masculinity. No, we don't even like give him joy. It's like some bullshit. And like, you know, and you guys can already start to change that. When you see a man like, and it's not just about the crying, and it's not just about the compassion, but like that also, you know, there's like realms that men never get to experience because we don't even allow the opening of that door, right? But it's like, yes, it is like the crying, it is the compassion, it is joy, like actual unbridled joy, not like sarcastic humor, not just like, it's such a beautiful day, it's so amazing to be a human being outside, just loving this. Like, we don't let men have that. We're like, why are you acting so it's too fruity for me. Like, don't stop that. Like, be a little bit more manly. Enjoy it like the outdoors with shoot a duck. That'll do it, right? And it's like, that is why we have to contend with like all this emotional energy just then goes through a couple barrels, through like lust and rage. And then we say, well, like, you were rageful enough in a way that you led our company to some success, so boom, here's your promotion, right? It's like, we don't understand that a lot of this ambition is also like basically a channeling of all that stuff. We need to look a little bit deeper on the way that we praise people. We need to look a little bit deeper into how we love people. And it's like, you guys actually can really do a lot. I mean, it's, like I mentioned, like the super nerdy term, like mating fitness, but like a way that the world can change is that like women can decide to date better men, right? That is one of the ways that women, like the whole thing can change. Because you're like, oh, you're a shitty man, I'm done. And this guy that you thought was not a good man, I'm with him. Because he's real good at relationships and he cares about me, right? It's like, do more of that, and eventually men will be like, yeah, I'm not getting any more sex. What the hell are these guys doing? Well, you had to listen to her? What? That's crazy. I'm going to try that, maybe. So, yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Can you just share a little bit of your experience in the workplace, being transgender? I know like women are told like not to put too much makeup on and watch their nails. So how does it work when you're transgender and you want to be a professional? Like, are you considered distracting to other employees? Are you hindered from growth? Do you have any experience in that in the workplace?
Yeah, it's 100% different for men and women in the workplace. Like as a man, I'm just like, oh, here's my opinion, and people are like, oh, that's a pretty good idea. No. And then like as a woman, it's like I need to like ask it as a question. Like, oh, wouldn't it be a good idea if we did this amazing, great idea? And they're like, oh, yeah, okay. let's talk about that a little bit more. But, okay. But they're not just like, yeah, it's a great idea. And it's like, sheesh. And it's not that I didn't try. It's not that I don't recognize that I could just say it. I did try to say it, and it was just like, oh, well, but the point I was making was this. It's like, what just happened? Like, I mean, even people that like know me and like know I'm the same person, they do that. And I was like, oh, because it's not even me. It's just this whole thing that you do to all women. It's this whole thing that you do for all men. And it's like, shoot, like why? I think as a trans person, it's like you completely notice the difference because you're literally the same person having that both experiences. Like there's another person, he recently passed away, but amazing scientific researcher named Ben Bars. And like he was born a woman, he transitioned to be a man later in his life, but he had done a bunch of research on neuroscience in the brain as a woman and then later as a man. And he was in a meeting, and in the meeting, like one of the people was like, oh, I read some of your papers, they're fantastic, much better than your sister's. And, he corrected, but it's like, what happened there? He wasn't a worse researcher, he was literally the same researcher. All that happened when you just get to see like the biases that people have super clearly because it's a completely controlled experiment. You're literally the same person. Right? It's not like, oh, if I could imagine what it would be like a man. It's like, no. Like this was the same person and his research was respected when he became a man. That's in the workplace, it's enormous. And if people know that you're trans, then like there's a huge amount of workplace discrimination. People are fired for it. You can actually legally murder a trans person as long as you said that it happened in a trans panic moment. That like if you were gonna, like for example, if you were going to, this is actually how a lot of trans women get murdered. Because there's like men that like to, have sex with us basically, but then like their friends discover it. And they're like, oh my God, my friends are gonna think I'm gay now. And they go and murder the person that they've been having sex with. Now, this is called the trans panic defense because you can then go in front of a judge and be like, oh, I didn't know they were trans and it came all of a sudden, they totally tricked me. So I had no control. It was just emotional. I like murdered them right there. But I know for a fact that like a lot of these people, like we're seeing lots of trans people before. It's just that somebody found out and now their masculinity is in threat and they murdered them. So the trans panic defense is accepted as a defense that gets you a much lighter sentence or gets you off of a murder charge in 49 states out of 50. Right? Like only Ohio did the right thing. Nice job. But like But it's like, that's crazy town, right? Because that's basically like murder is okay for these types of people. Like, I don't know. Like some of this stuff, like when you say it out loud, it sounds so ridiculous that it couldn't happen. Oh, here's another funny one because I looked into, because the whole thing like, oh, we can't use the bathroom because maybe like, what's funny is that it wasn't even like they said trans people will go in there and molest children. They're like, oh, these like perverted dudes are going to go in there and use it as a reason to go molest children. And I was like, look, molesting children is already a crime. You don't need to go exclude trans people from being in public spaces in order to go and deal with a crime that's already a crime. And then out of curiosity, I like looked up, how many, because the entire subtext of the entire thing is that trans people are perverted and they do sexual crimes. In practice, trans people commit way fewer rapes and violence because they actually know what it's like to be both genders. Like if you actually knew the type of violence you were perpetuating on somebody, then it's much harder for you to like not feel that you're doing that if something violent starts to happen. So anyway, I looked it up and like more Republican people in the Congress and the Senate like had actually committed sexual crimes than all the trans folks that had been reported in the whole country. And I was like, that's a kettle calling something, not even something else black. It's like, because we're not, anyway, you get it. So I think that's the time. Thank you.
Into the wild I'm going.